Hi, everyone, and welcome to our LinkedIn Live Exposure to the Unplanned. My name is Jeff Stein, and I'm a senior manager with GEP, focusing on employer branding and employee communications. I'm heading towards 5 years here with GEP, and also that means full vestment in the retirement plan soon. I'll go into the genesis of how this discussion came about right after I introduce my colleagues. And first of all, you'll notice some of the cameras shifting around. We're using this creepy new owl camera, which follows and knows what we're
Super
doing.
smart,
Yeah,
intelligent.
I like it. First, we have Ben Hinge. He's a director of consulting in the US over here. Ben's been with GEP for nearly 8 years. And we have Carolina Valdezon. Say hi to Caroline so the owl sees you. Carolina has been here for just a little more than 2 years, right?
Yep.
And rounding out the panel is Krishna Chaitanya, and he's a senior software engineer with GP. You've been here a little more than 4 years.
That's right. Hey, guys.
Okay. Well, thank you all for joining me today. I really appreciate you doing this and trying something new because, that's kind of what today's conversation is about. Trying different things, new things, or trying old things that work. So, and let me talk about, how we came to this conversation, exposure with Unplanned, and what it means. It's give you the genesis or the origin story, not the most interesting origin story. This is not a comic book.
We're not making a Marvel movie here.
No, we are not. Sometimes we contribute to the making of a Marvel movie. But exposure to the Unplanned, I don't know if it's an actual phrase, but they are real words. And they were uttered by my colleague Paul Blake in a LinkedIn Live that he did last month with our president and co-founder, Rupa Gandhi. And he was looking to describe one difference of working in the office compared to working remotely. And, he was trying to convey, you never know what you might see, who you might meet, what you're going to experience. So, we're not here to talk about, why you should be working in the office, not working at home. I think there's benefits for both. And for the past 2 or 3 years almost, we've talked ad nauseum about the benefits. I think we know of working remotely. There's a lot.
Yeah, true.
We get it. But, there are some advantages to in-person work or going to the office. And I think it's fair that we highlight those. Now, Carolina, you and I were talking last month, and we were having actually a conversation on MS Teams on camera because neither you or I are shy when it comes to in person
We're not
or
college
remote.
shy.
So for us, it's a little easier. But I asked you why you come into the office, and it wasn't a big philosophical, why. I was meaning like, what activities, what events bring you in there, what's good, and can you remember what you told me?
Yeah, no, you make a good point. I think we both get our personalities across using Teams, but why do we come in? What I said to you was because you never know what's going to happen. You'll run into somebody or you'll learn something new and it's going to be great, even if what you learn is about yourself that day. Admittedly, when I first started coming in, it felt a little redundant because I didn't have my clients aren't in the Northeast, and even my GP team isn't in the Northeast either. So it was just, I would come in, I'd try to, obviously, the town halls are great events and in person trainings are becoming more and more popular. But then I just started making one on ones, giving myself a reason to come in. Sometimes it would be once a week. For a while, it would be once a month. And then I got pretty good at every other week. Uh, but eventually, I just felt like this office was less mysterious. I felt much more a part of a group and really less like a hired contractor just sitting from home. It started to dismantle all that. And slowly but surely, I was more comfortable with small talk, with saying hi to people. And I didn't know that I was missing that until, like day 15 of coming into the office.
Yeah, because you and I actually met remotely,
Yeah.
and this is before the pandemic. You were at school in Pennsylvania, and you were thinking about joining GEP, so we had some, remote conversations. So remote does work, but I think since we've met, we've been able to actually build a more significant relationship, or maybe it's just faster than if it was only remote.
Yeah, it feels more personal since we've been able to touch base in person. There's something about knowing you're on camera, knowing that it's, the company's team's account, that when you see someone and you can just chat and have a conversation, just body language and being able to practice all that was the small soft skills that I honestly didn't think about missing out on when I work at home, because I'm just focused on the client work.
Right. Yeah, and we'll get more into that, the soft skills, but with today's talk is going to be about 45 minutes, and we I forgot to go over this in the beginning, and my colleague is probably thinking do the housekeeping, but there is the chat function here, so if you have any questions or comments, why don't you throw it in the chat, and we're going to get to that in the last 15 minutes or so of the discussion. Now, Krishna, I wanted to talk to you next. You and I discussing the advantages, and just to remind everyone, you're an engineer, software engineer, because we have GEP is services and software for procurement and supply chain. So it's kind of unique to have both sides, the software development and the advisory side. But you're in our technology group. When you were and I discussing the advantages of coming to the office, you didn't give me an answer that I thought would be obvious, like, exposure to colleagues who know different things, and being able to, use the technology here that's faster. Your immediate thought was about missing the time you get to rock out to loud music in your car on the way to work. What does that moment in your car with the music mean to you mentally? It's more than a drive, right?
Absolutely, Jeff. So before the pandemic, I used to drive to office regularly, and I have a Tesla, so I mostly drive on autopilot.
Wow.
And
that helps.
So yeah, I had a ritual of having like loud music on my car and singing along with it, which used to clear my mind, and it used to motivate me for the rest of the day. So yeah, so I tried to emulate this when I was working from home during the pandemic by putting on loud music on my speakers at home. But it is not the same, right? Because I'm still in the same environment, and my mental, the environment is still the same. So yeah, I honestly miss the time that I had when I was driving.
Yeah. Were you going to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people, or a lot of the arguments I've heard for sort of not coming to the office is that the commute's kind of wasted time, right? It's extra time you have to plan for in the day, and especially if folks have families, have other commitments, etc. It can just be kind of one more thing on the list, one more reason to go one way or the other. Hearing that perspective is a sort of refreshing change, a nice different view on it. I'm kind of the same. I mean, my commute's not short, and I don't have autopilot, but I enjoy that commute more on the back end of the day, right? I think getting prepared for the day is awesome, right? If you can kind of get jazzed up, coming in and get that motivation. But for me, often it's the reverse. It's on the way home. I get that kind of decompression time.
That's
assuming traffic's not bad, right? Traffic will wind you up in a different way, but having that time to sort of just let the work stuff be behind you. You go back to home, and home's kind of a sanctuary, or wherever you're going, that's not work. You can kind of create a little bit of separation, and I've certainly enjoyed getting that back.
Yeah, I had spoken to a colleague in Mumbai, and this was during the pandemic, and I said, well, this must be great for you because you have small kids and you don't have to commute anymore. And she said, no, it's not great for me. I have small kids. And she's like, Mumbai traffic might be horrible, but I had my hour in the morning that was mine. And, I don't, it's hard for me to find that, disconnection between office and, work now, and it doesn't have her time anymore.
Yeah, just to add to this, I think commute is a very interesting conversation.
Yeah.
I living in the city, I take the subway to Penn Station, and then from there get on the New Jersey Transit, make it to the Rahway station, and then hop on station cab, and even before then, I was taking the bus from Port Authority all the way just to like the Dunkin' Donuts, 2-minute walk from here. So I was definitely one of the people that commute is frustrating. Even the investment that goes into that when I think about how often can I realistically come into the office. But it's, again, after coming in every once in a while and hearing the stories about how people do use commuting to decompress or to amp themselves up, that's something I'm not going to learn sitting at home. I'm just going to complain in my head and validate to myself, why am I going to commute? But hearing stories really does help me think, okay, maybe there's another way to view this commute. Plus, after doing it a few times, I figured out what works for me. Don't miss, the certain train, or you're going to have to wait a while. All of that I've learned after a summer of essentially pushing myself to come into the office.
Yeah. I guess it's not, we're not here to promote cars,
No,
electric or internal combustion engines. I remember when I lived and worked in New York City. I mean, I even thought of the subway time and my reading time. It's just the mental break. So maybe if you work at home, you just need meditation or something, but it's about that physical or mental break. Let me just get back here. Now, Ben, like me, you have a few more miles on the workplace odometer than Krishna or Carolina.
Very nice way of calling the old one. Thank you.
So we remember the before times, and we don't want to sound like the old fuddy-duddies. Just because we did things a certain way back in the day, you have to do them, because that doesn't make any sense.
No.
We just learned a lot of valuable experience. What works better remotely, what doesn't. But we actually know what worked for us personally in our career and what didn't. So I think we owe it to people to share the good things, that they don't get thrown out. How do you feel junior team members, and again, you're in consulting, and you have teams that join as classes, and the expectation is they're going to learn and grow, and the senior consultants are going to teach them. What disadvantages are they at but not taking advantage of working in person?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few different things. To your point, the consulting hires that we make, especially at the campus level, come in as a group, right? And through the pandemic, we've had sort of mixed experiences in terms of how we've onboarded those groups and tried to sort of foster as much connectivity as possible as those groups have come on board. And it's I think it would be. I think the groups themselves, the junior team members themselves, would agree that having in the initial phases some time together in person, whether that's an offsite training, whether that's some kind of team building, whatever else, is really, really helpful to sort of build an initial connection, right? It removes, I think, barriers that people don't recognize exist to just working with other people outside of your immediate team. I think in a consulting environment, it's very collaborative a lot of the time, right? And within your team of 2, 3, 5, 10 people, however you might be on a client team, there's a lot of interaction that goes on day to day, hour to hour with that small group. But finding ways to get in person has really sort of helped, I think, break down the barriers of just limiting to that team, right? It's easy to become kind of siloed sometimes to that particular account, that particular project. And so creating those opportunities, it's helped with a lot of firm building initiatives, internal kind of projects that people are finding themselves on.
Explain firm building for people who are not.
So firm building for us is, client work, I would say, is 100% of the day. Our clients pay us to be present, available, et cetera. And so, that takes up the vast majority of the time, but we also have an expectation for each of us that we're going to contribute to the growth of the firm somehow. So hence firm building, and that could be, talent development. It could be, sales endeavors. It could be really anything that's helping to push us forward. And that tends to form sort of internal cross-functional teams that spring up somewhat organically, and more so now than they have in the last couple of years, I think. But it creates a really good opportunity for us to learn across functions. I think that's how we've come here today, right? Is just from communicating across functions. So anyone who has an opportunity to be in the office and to go meet new colleagues, and Carolina, you hinted at this earlier on, just creating that opportunity. Anyone who has the chance to do that and opts not to is opting out of those additional experiences, right? Opting out of breaking down those barriers, opting out of additional connections, etc. And it's very difficult to say what they're missing out on. What opportunities are going to be lost. I can't tell anyone what they're going to find when they try and come in and explore those opportunities. But I know that they're. I've seen it happen time and again to myself and to others. So it's you don't know what you're going to get until you try. But I think that's what's missing for some folks.
And it's kind of a long-term process. You don't know what you're going to get till you try. Even any sort of relationship is not built on one date. It's over and over. It's more about consistency. It might not be, depends for myself, how often I come into the office. I have a bunch of colleagues that I work closely with, and we decided Tuesday and Thursday is a nice day for us to get together. Sometimes it'll just be Tuesday, or sometimes it'll be Wednesday because this is happening. It's all about planning, looking forward and being consistent, but some things happen in one day. It's like, oh,
sure.
But, it's really, for me, it's been about strategically planning and consistently. I definitely enjoy working remotely or working from home sometimes. But even though I live alone, I have to have that mental break, get in the car, smell the fresh coffee, see the sunrise, and, switch on and off. Otherwise, it's just, and that's my brain.
Yeah.
And that's my personality. Some people are good with it.
No, I laugh because there's definitely been some days where I come in and I'm like, there's 2 people here. Why did I, make the long commute? And it can be frustrating. Then there are other days where I'm like, oh, free food. Oh, tons of, I can get my own coffee, like meet different people. And I feel those social skills finally being used. But yeah, it's not just one thing. And it takes time and patience to learn that.
Yeah, so I would suggest to anyone listening out there to make it effective, senior and junior people plan together to make it effective and consistently, and set some dates consistently. Whether you're a firm, it makes sense for once a month, once a week, 3 times a week, whatever that is, but it still has to be planned with different levels.
So something on that point is, again, when I was thinking about coming in, I would get very nervous and anxious because I have sometimes early calls with my clients every single day. So I have to think about, am I going to catch a 7:30 train? Can I wait to get in around noontime? As a person who started with the company in post-COVID time, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what the protocol was. The ins and outs of the company. Am I going to get in trouble for something? All these things were coming up because I just wanted to do a good job. And then finally making it into the office, interacting with executives who have gone through this mental game before, I was able to see how they build out their day, how they plan and make it into the office, and how they stay calm and collected, and really trying to emulate those leadership skills that I don't see working from home. But I didn't know that until several times coming in. And again, I'm coming in from a post-COVID hired experience where there's a huge gap there between somebody who's been with the company for several years, feels comfortable in the office, whereas, I have to look for where all the different hidden places are.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you joined and then the pandemic happened, we didn't have a plan, because you and I talking about, well, we had a plan. We were working from home immediately, earlier than most companies, but that wasn't our prior way of working. So you're saying, I didn't know how it would be. Well, the whole world didn't know how it would be and the way back. So I think everyone, even if people look calm and cool and collected, everyone's not and trying to figure it out. Some people aren't. Some people are different than me.
I think one thing just to touch on there is kind of the idea of having flexibility in the workplace, right? I think depending on your role, your company, what your responsibilities might be, the degree of flexibility that you may have available to you could be different than what we have. But I think, at least from my perspective, what I've seen is GEP's been pretty good in that regard, right? In terms of just creating that flexibility, creating that safe space of, if you have other commitments, If you have those early calls and you want to come in at noon, cool, right? No one's watching you punch a time card. No one's necessarily going to question, hey, where have you been? Yeah, the old sarcastic, half day today question. Yeah, it might happen, but it's pretty rare. And if it is, it's very much tongue in
Nobody's
cheek.
asked me that.
So I think having that flexibility, whether that's an official policy, whether that's just kind of a general understanding, for people to be able to kind of meet their own needs, and not just get the benefit of being in the office or get the benefit of working from home or whatever else, but find that sort of balance that's optimal for them on any given day or week. I think that's huge. And the more that companies, employees are able to do that to the extent possible without jeopardizing client work or without jeopardizing deadlines or whatever else, I think it's only going to help with everyone finding that balance.
Yeah, I think it's when you hear about a high trust environments, GEP is that sort of culture. It's part of the culture where, and I could say this compared to places where I've been before, which have been really top-notch firms, and but it was a different time. Here, the expectation, and this works for me. It's like, well, there's still a high expectation for deliverables. That's not gonna. That's how we survive, And we talk about, our clients, right? Our paychecks, and we need that. That's not. But there is a feeling, a culture. It's just an understanding that, however you get things done in a great way, that's fine. If it's working remotely, if you have to go somewhere and take care of something personal, or if it's just your preference, how it gets done is not important. I'm not even talking about GEP. It's just in general. I think most places, if they could have that trust in their people, it'll get done. Because you also don't want to disappoint when you're given that amount of leeway and flexibility, and you don't want to screw it up for yourself or anyone. So you make sure you stay on top of things, no matter how that is for you. And also, everyone has a different brain chemistry and personality and a way of thinking and a preference, and I think that's something has to be taken into account. People think differently, so need to work differently. And that I'm really happy. I'm not happy the pandemic happened, but I'm happy the discussion
it's kind of
about work.
Different way of thinking. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Christian, I want to get back to you and inside of your Tesla. Now, the other thing you talked about besides rocking out in the Tesla, your hands off the wheel, I still can't believe that.
It's a little scary initially, but
if it's scary, you probably shouldn't do it. I'm a big car guy. I love cars, but I worry about the self-driving. But that'll be another LinkedIn Live. You were talking about brainstorming, which I wasn't even thinking about for our software engineers. I'm thinking coding. I'm thinking, I guess, where does that come from? I guess you have to have project and goals and things like that. So you were telling me, you're not happy with the limitations of brainstorming remotely. Could you get into that?
Yeah. Sure. So this happened towards the end of the pandemic, that we had a couple of brainstorming sessions set up on Microsoft Teams. And this is where we realized that there were some limitations to audio video chat applications, right? Like people were speaking over each other, and we were not able to drop the concepts and get our points across as clearly. And we couldn't gauge the facial expression of our teams. So what we did is, needless to say, these brainstorming sessions were not as fruitful as we thought they would be. So next time around, what we did is we strategically planned to come into office and meet for a couple of hours. And so this time around, we had whiteboards and markers and stuff. So it was pretty easy to draw up our concepts and get our points across clearly. And I was able to sense the mood in the room, and I probed for further feedback. And so my colleagues were able to point out the deficiencies in the solution that was provided. And we were able to come up with potential solutions to those deficiencies. So I don't think this would have been the same if we were still continuing to brainstorm on Microsoft Teams. Also, especially when we are building platforms for larger enterprise applications, it's really important to have that face time to, yeah.
Well, and I mean, obviously, all of us brainstorm or have creative meetings and idea sessions remotely because we have to, and we do, and we make it work. But I think there's an opportunity for more efficient, shorter, and maybe even better. Who knows? We'll never know,
Mhm.
you know, unless you do them both at the same time. Definitely with my team, I've seen, I have a team that I work with in Mumbai. We've never met, the three people I work closely with. And that's, that's always going to be the limit. If I had a choice, I would, but I don't. But definitely with my team members here in the New York area, it's almost like texting. You can't read someone's facial expression or tone. And when I'm on these large Teams or Zoom calls that are, you can't always see the person. They don't have a creepy owl camera like we have that's bouncing around to the right individual. I was thinking, did they like or is that sarcastic? Or I don't feel good interrupting or interjecting right now. It's just not as good.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone's kind of said for a long time that 90%, 70%, some large percentage of what you communicate when you communicate with people isn't in what you say, right? It's in how you say it, or it's in your facial expression, or it's in your body language, or it's in whatever else. And not to knock on Teams or Zoom or Google Meet or whatever the application is, but even if you use those to the fullest extent, you're probably only seeing shoulders up, some kind of bust, and to your point, only if you're speaking or you've just spoken. If it's a big meeting, you're probably not seeing everyone full time. And so, if you're trying to get 100% of your message across, then straight away you've already limited how much of that's getting through just by how much of you can be seen and how often you can be seen before you even start trying to talk, before you start trying to use facial expressions, etc. And so, naturally, it becomes more challenging to do that. I think if you're in sort of very task-oriented environments, and it's you're just trying to say, all right, I need you to do ABC. A lot of the time, platforms like that or systems like that can get the majority of what you need to get done. But as soon as you start getting into those contentious conversations, a little bit more creative, you need a lot of opinions. You need to have that healthy debate, should we say, to reach a solution. That's when you start to see the limitations, and I see it on the client side a lot. Right, as soon as there's a new big problem that needs to be solved, it tends to be, hey, can you come in for a day or two, or can you come in for a week? Let's get in a room and hash this out. I think everyone's thinking similarly about it. And if you're in a fast-paced environment where there's new stuff like that cropping up all the time, where it requires that kind of brain power, collective brain power, there really isn't a substitute, I don't think, for getting in a room if you want to have the right experience.
I think a lot of what we're talking about today too is just the option of an opportunity, right? So of course, the pandemic, we were being healthy and being safe, and so there was a reason we were working from home. Now we're taking the right precautions, but some people are really good at getting their message across Teams. They can sit anywhere and they know when to wait for the pauses, when to interject, when to speak up. Other people need the option of being in person and saying, if you can just hear me and see how I communicate, they can show their leadership skills, their capabilities in a way that doesn't always get across. And that's just knowing who you are, knowing your own skill set, and being a part of a team that at least gives you that option. And there's always limitations to that, but I'm thankful that at least you can practice that in person if needed.
I think that's that should have been the subhead for this discussion: exposure to the unplanned, the option for an opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm really impressed by myself.
Trademark it.
Yeah. But on the flip, you were saying some people are good virtually. I don't know if I'm good or not. I mean, I'm probably a bunch of people out there not thinking that right now. But
there's a chat function, right? Let's find out.
We'll find out.
Take a poll.
But I don't love it all the time. Like, I'm a social person, so I need to be in front of people. But that in front of people could be digitally. Some people have the skill. We have, like most modern firms, GP has people who live in geographies that are not near an office. So, I don't want to say that these people are at a disadvantage because, even before pandemic, they had joined, work was always going to be remote, and they might be with clients most of the time or business development. So that just makes sense. as I said, some people I think are more comfortable with it and work it better. Like I was really impressed with a young person, Claire, one of our interns. She joined us for 8 weeks this summer in consulting, and she volunteered to do her firm building besides obviously learning the client work. Uh, she, for GEP Pride, which is our employee resource group, which I'm a part of, the LGBTQIA group, she had volunteered to do her firm building there. So, we had some interactions on email and even a group Teams, but there was a bunch of other interns all during the same 8 week period. And everyone was, really smart, really capable, but no one was standing out for me if I had to think. But she was very aggressive and saying, let's talk. I'm going to put 15 minutes. I want to talk about your experience here. And, I just want to talk about what, I'm doing. And it was great. And by her reaching out, and we talked just on video and Teams, because she's in Michigan. She was never going to come to our New Jersey office. She was only here for 8 weeks, but she reached out. She had also written things for us for the company intranet. She took part in other programs. And then she telling me about her career hopes and goals. And it let me know, I was like, oh, you're on this account, which is pharmaceuticals, but it sounds like you really want to work with food and hospitality. You should be talking to X, Y, and Z. This person has that if that's really where you want to go. Oh, you speak German. So, a lot of our work is done in Germany and the Czech Republic where they need German speakers. So I was just impressed by that extra that I think you have to do if you're only going to be remote, but it is possible, but you have to put in a little more effort.
Yeah, I think you nailed it, right? It's you can get most of the way there, but it's not going to be quite as organic a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Right. I think in the office environment, those kinds of things will happen, not to use a horrible cliche, but water cooler conversations, right? You'll pass someone in the hallway, or you'll be talking to somebody and they know somebody else, and there's an introduction made, right? Those kinds of things happen naturally, day in, day out. Going the extra mile, or needing to go the extra mile to all right, find the available time, put it on the calendar, explain why I'm blocking the time, make the slightly awkward introduction, and all that kind of stuff. It's that much more. It's a little bit more of a barrier. It can be overcome for sure. But when people are moving a million miles an hour and they have all the things in the world to get done, one more thing can add up for sure.
And by the way, our water cooler here, not just water, but seltzer and flavored seltzer.
Mm-hmm.
Actually,
plenty of time to get stuck
that.
there playing with it.
It's reusable, recyclable.
We have some questions coming in, so I want to get to those, and I'm sure we'll start bigger conversations. Somebody wanted to know, do you feel connected enough to your teammates while working from home? And we could go around the table, and my answer would be, I have teammates that I was very connected with before I started working remotely, because we did work in an office. It took me longer to get connected to my other teammates in other offices, but we made an effort to, besides have team meetings that were focused on deliverables and what's going on. It might seem silly sometimes, but just to have those meetings, like this is after work happy hour. Ask me anything. Let's just talk about anything but work. And you find personal facts. Some people don't want to partake, and that's their boundary, and they're not that interested in getting to know their teammates, and that's really cool. But it's not cool for me. I wouldn't enjoy my work life. So I definitely feel more connected to the teammates that I knew before the pandemic. It's taken me a little longer to connect with the teammates since the remote work, but I have to say there are a few teammates that, like Claire, go that extra mile and reach out or connect with me on a different level. And so yes, I feel connected, but there's different tiers. It sounds horrible, but it's just practical.
So before the pandemic, when I was coming to office regularly, Like me and my colleagues used to go for lunches, and we would never speak about work during these lunches. So I had a pretty great time, and I made great connections. And like we also have like table tennis here in the office. We have the virtual golf and stuff. So yeah, we used to take some time to enjoy ourselves and get to know each other apart from work as well. Yeah, but it has been a little difficult since I moved teams during the pandemic, and that we are trying to like merge the gap right now by coming to office a few days a week.
So I hear a lot about, pre-COVID GP life.
Probably sick of it, right?
Well, it's just it's hard to relate to it when I wasn't there, when I wasn't a part of it. So I'm always have always been used to working from home, and even if that wouldn't be the case, my team is very small. I have some colleagues that sit in Mumbai, someone else sits in Europe, and someone in North Carolina, and that's it. And my client is based out of St. Louis. So we have to make the time to do uh, those activities, to set aside some time. And that really didn't even get started until this summer, to create that cohesion. So for me, that question is less about feeling connected with my team and our client work, and more so trying to feel connected to the company and to GEP in general. Because as a consultant, we do have two corporate cultures to navigate and to balance all the time. And just I was really seeking to close the gap when it comes to feeling comfortable and knowing GEP, and what it feels like to be in this environment. So now that I have started coming in more, I'm gaining more confidence to have the conversations and to say hi to people and really show my personality, which is different sometimes than at the client side and the client work. So it's I think, a unique perspective and an interesting question.
Yeah. Actually, the next question is really interesting. We've heard it a lot, and Ben and I have feelings about it. Somebody asked, working from home or compared to working to the office doesn't really hamper my productivity. Should the company still make it mandatory for me to work from the office? Well, I mean, every company is different at work, and our conversation and the way GP looks at it, this is not about productivity when we talk about coming into the office. The problem is productivity is pretty good. We trust our people, they get things done. The long-term worry is not about productivity. It's about the development of people and their soft skills and their relationships for the long term. So whether a company makes it mandatory or not mandatory, that's up to them because of the situation stuff. But the work from home versus office, for me, doesn't have anything to do with productivity. It's for my mental health, to get that break. It's to socialize. It's, going back to the exposure to the unplanned, it's a little excitement in my day because it could get very boring not having unplanned. I like, not knowing what's around the corner. And if I know coming to an office, in suburban New Jersey might not sound exciting to a lot of people, but it's my excitement for the day.
Yeah.
Even there's a few people on this LinkedIn Live that I know are colleagues I met in my 20s that, because we're in the office, we became friends. And, to this day, we're really good friends. We see each other, we travel, we talk every day. And that, so for me, it's about relationships and connections that nourish my soul, if I could get a little woo-woo. But yeah, this conversation is not about productivity, unless for me, if my mental health declines, that will affect my productivity. So I have to do what's right for me and balance.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, agree.
Yeah.
I'll be honest. Sort of pre-COVID, I didn't think of myself as a particularly social human. For better or worse, I spent a lot of time on the road traveling, whether to clients, to sales endeavors, to recruitment events, to whatever. And often I would find, I'd get to the end of a day or the end of a week and, get my me time and I would crash. I'd be like, finally, I get some alone time. I don't have to be around anyone. I can just kind of decompress a little bit. It was amazing to me how quickly that changed during the beginning of the pandemic, to go from really valuing that kind of silo time to spending too much time. in a silo and really craving the human interaction. So for me, yeah, the relationships, the social skills are a huge part of coming back into the office. I think to your point about productivity, for me, the same thing. I mean, if anything, I would say sometimes my productivity dips slightly when I'm in the office, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I want to be really sort of task oriented for the day, I have deliverables to get through. Sometimes being in the office and having the extra level of distraction or whatever else can be detrimental to that. But I think it's also an investment sometimes in beyond that day. And to your point earlier on about coming in and finding things that last beyond the day, beyond the week, the month. If you remain sort of very task oriented, very focused on the here and now, and churning out a workload, then honestly, being remote is probably going to help you. If you want to think about sort of 3 months, 6 months, 2 years, 10 years out, and what you want to do, and the new things you want to get involved in, the skills you want to develop, the relationships you want to build. I think that's when once you start setting those goals and marching towards those, all the things we've talked about in terms of breaking down barriers to communication or increasing collaboration or relationship building, etc. All those things just get a little bit easier when you can be in person. So, if people are wondering about sort of coming into the office and or not, being remote, right? You're physically located somewhere other than an office, and wondering, well, what does that mean to me? I think my thinking there, my advice would be, when you do get the opportunity, or when you find the opportunity to go to an office, maximize it to the extent you can. If you're gonna take a little hit on productivity, or it's going to cost you an extra travel time or whatever else, like how are you going to plan your time there to get the most out of it possible? Whether that's making introductions, whether that's bringing other people in with you to spend the most productive time or whatever. I do think there's benefit to it.
What else would be good too? Just listening to you explain that. You can create a presence even when you're not there. So oftentimes a lot of companies are trying to do firm building things or create activities together, and you're on an invite list. If for some reason you have a huge workload that day and you can't make it into the office, it's also very helpful to send that email and say, I'm not going to be there that day, or I wish I could come in, but I really am unable to. And explaining that, or just letting the organizer know that you won't be there, also gives the relief of somebody trying to put people in. You're not just not showing up because it's not mandatory. There's more communication that I think after a few years of being in the pandemic that can still happen, that creates a presence for you without even physically coming into the office.
Yeah. You're good at setting boundaries and keeping boundaries. Even yesterday, I said, to this team, let's come in Tuesday and check out the equipment before Wednesday. And Caroline said, that does sound like a great idea, Jeff. However, because I'll be coming in tomorrow and I do need to come in Friday for some events, that would be just a little too much. Is it possible? So I said, I'm really just checking the equipment and we could talk about things. But you have to then be clear with people.
Yeah. And of course it gets difficult when it's like 100, 200 person invite, but even like 30 people, somebody's putting effort to try to do something. And that it's relationship building, just to say, not this time. And it's better than just, ghosting somebody.
Don't ghost.
Yes.
And there are more questions I will get to for the team monitoring the chat. But one thing you were talking about the other day was that as a woman, you feel it's more important to be very proactive with your networking. Now, what does that mean to like in office time and not office time? Why is it important?
It's something I've thought a lot about, and knowing that there are additional barriers and challenges, whether real or perceived, for a woman in business. And it's already difficult enough, especially being a person of color. I think about, what do I need to do that some of my other colleagues are doing? How can I be more standout and make sure that I'm being the right leader that I can be and giving the productivity back? And to know that I have the option of showing my leadership skills, of my capabilities in person, especially to the executive team that's asking for that, And to know that I can do that, it's very important for me because I don't want there to be a single reason for why I'm not being a standout employee. And those are the things that I think a lot of women think through, and really anybody in business thinks through, right? It is inherently a competitive environment. So when we're being asked and we know that we're coming in person, if somebody doesn't feel comfortable meeting with me via Teams, or I get a little more shy talking to people via Teams, especially high executive men, it's easy to just break down some of those barriers by saying, hey, I'm a person, you're a person. Let's talk about water cooler things or what's going on in the company, and showcasing that I have an opinion and a voice, and it matters.
Yep, that's important. Yeah, it's whatever group you're in, I think just visibility is important.
Yeah.
Showing up, and because visibility is what I think leads to change. You can't hide in the background, and it's been put upon a lot of people to be more visible, and that sucks.
Yeah.
But the reality is you could do something a little more by being a little more. You shouldn't have to be, but something we could all do.
Yeah, and I relate that back to a lot of the incoming GEPers as well. People, when they get a job offer, and I'm thinking of the recent graduates, they have excitement and momentum to come into the office. And if they come in and there's nobody there, then little by little you start to get demotivated. And especially, and I do think about my visibility, and being a woman, I want to show that I'm here. Let's talk about things that you might not feel comfortable talking about other people. You know me, Jeff, I'm very transparent and open. And I like to see that in the workplace. And so on those days where there's only 2 people in the office, I can be that person for somebody else to just communicate and talk to. And I really take that into, in all seriousness.
Yeah. Now we have just about 10 minutes left and a bunch more questions. Yes, I'll go over them. Maybe you could take one, we go rapid fire. Do you feel you've been able to learn and grow in the last few months? If so, how? And I'm guessing if the person saying it's the last few months, really last few months, not during the pandemic. So,
wow, that's a hell of a question. I think like a lot of answers we've given today, yes, but
yes, but
right. Yes, I still feel like there's been opportunity to learn and to grow. The client certainly keeps me challenged in terms of that side of my personal development. I think what's been probably a little bit more difficult is the stuff that's hard to define, right? And I'm gonna have a hard time even trying to define it now. But you can talk about sort of social skills, and relationship management, things like that. You can talk about the skills that you don't know you don't have, right? I think it becomes more difficult sometimes in a silo to identify where those gaps might be, or what things you need to work on, because there's not a constant feedback loop from a manager you might be sitting with, or a peer who knows something that you don't, or whatever else. I think those kinds of things are tough. So yes, still feel there's there's learning and growth, but I also feel like there's more room for more at the same time.
Thanks for that. This is another kind of general one, but maybe pick one thing. Pick one thing. So, Krishna, can you share what challenges you have faced while working from home?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I said, communication was the main thing. Like, we were building a platform for an enterprise application, and like it has a lot of moving parts, and so we face a lot of difficulties by communicating through Teams, and fortunately that has gone down a lot since like people started coming into office a couple of days a week. So yeah, I think that was the communication was the
That
big
was the
issue.
challenge.
Yeah, that was a big challenge.
Yeah, it's I think that's the core of everything.
Yeah.
Communication was just very as we say, siloed. Everything was very defined with a specific deliverable, and lost that certain, that essence of, just organic communication. I was watching a documentary on cats on Netflix yesterday. I was learning a lot about their communication and sound
think we're
waves.
cats.
So
They don't
I
get-
think
they don't get a whole lot of buttons.
Yeah. So there's a lot of things that I didn't realize were communicated through facial expressions and all that. So yeah, very interesting. Now, here's a good one. What can leadership do to support your work while you work from home? And I'll start with that. I mean, our leadership here, particularly is very, a lot of our founders were a private company, have science backgrounds, and, we shut down right away the offices, but we're a company that develops cloud-based software. We all work, we make it so other people could work remotely. It wasn't a trick for us to work from home, and we always had that flexibility. Sometimes I would work from home if it was, snowing, like you and I were talking about, or anything, just, I had things going on. Or if you live farther away, I moved closer to the office like a month before the pandemic hit, so I wouldn't have as big of a commute. But it worked.
Yeah.
But what they can do is, provide the technology. That was just foundational. We all talk about, I was listening to Rupa at another panel talk about, just this 15 years ago, it wouldn't have happened like this. We didn't have the technology.
Yeah.
But I remember, just everyone was set up with a laptop, and if they didn't, they got it quick, or IT teams did, and that was very rare. But, and they were just, they were very visible. Remotely and virtually, and supported all of the employee resource groups virtually and remotely, and being present, being visible. So to me, the way that leadership could support work from home when you have to do it is just be very present, visible after the actual fundamental technology.
Maybe I can add a couple of things. So, we've talked a lot about sort of opportunities that may not be quite as available in a remote environment. And I think, the responsibility for any leader, any part of the organization, is to do what they can based on their own experience or based on shared experiences to create those for people who may not otherwise have them. So, whether it's making introductions, to your point, right, with the intern, right? Of if you need to speak to somebody with this kind of skill set, right? How are you going to connect dots for people that they may not otherwise be able to connect to themselves? If someone needs to sort of be heard to share their view, their opinion, like how do you create the space or the time to have that sort of personal one-on-one conversation, even if it is through Teams or on the phone or whatever else? I think that's important, that everyone just has to be a little bit more sort of conscious of those kinds of things. And it starts at the top, I think, and filters down through the organization. The second thing is really, really kind of listening, right? I think it's very easy for a lot of us to become super task oriented and to sort of not get blinded, but you just forget about the fact that the world has kind of changed. Everyone's going to have their own individual needs. Everyone's going to hopefully express those, or be given the opportunity to express those. And listening and being adaptable to the extent possible, it's going to go a long way towards not just productivity, not just creating an opportunity on a given day, but to actual like individual well-being, employee retention, all the rest of that. The good stuff that comes with that. And then a third thought is, we may well see over time that the physical infrastructure changes, whether that be at GEP or other companies. I know there's other large organizations out there that are already sort of foregoing office space and leaning into the whole work from home culture. On the one hand, the sort of cost cutting and savings and everything that come along with that is great, but it, I think, also needs to come with the understanding that there will then have to be investments in other ways, in other areas to keep culture alive, to keep team building, connectivity, etc. So if a team's not now working in the office every day, how are you going to take that rent savings and put that into a team building trip once a quarter or something like that, to make sure that there's still ways to keep people connected?
You're here. to all three of those points.
And that leads in, and I'm gonna, I'll let everyone say something if you want to at the end. But really, we only have a few minutes left. So, what I want to say, if you're still here, thank you for making it through. It went really quick, but we're probably gonna have more conversations like this. I enjoyed it because I know everyone is talking about this constantly with colleagues, with friends, and we're not workplace experts. I mean, we are in the fact that we work in a place and, we have our own expertise in our personal experiences. And for me, it's an ongoing, I'm not going to say struggle, but, you have to make a conscious effort to figure out what will work personally. For me, I have to think what will work personally at this moment for my goals, future goals. I'm not talking about like a deliverable for KRAs or something like my future career goals, which are going to be very different from Caroline's, and life goals, and and for how my brain works, because everyone has a different way of thinking, and I have to figure out what's going to keep me healthy mentally and physically. So, and that's a constantly moving and shifting formula, or it's not a set formula. It's a shifting target, it changes all the time, goals. So I think this discussion is more about maximizing the advantages for whatever your work situation is. But one of those advantages is you do have the opportunity to meet people in person. Take it. It's easy to stay home and chat, and it seems like you're having those interactions, but you're not giving yourself as much options for opportunities.
Yeah.
Also, like one more point that I wanted to touch on that topic is that it's difficult to get like consistent feedback from your mentors when you're working from home. So that actually slows down your progress. Yeah. That's what I observed.
When they don't see it, they forget you after a while.
Yeah.
Yes. On the idea of learning about yourself, I know for me personally, I'm working on having more polished executive presence and, speaking directly and with the purpose. And I thought I was pretty good at that. And then I come into the office and I realize, wow, I'm forgetting to make eye contact, to stand up straight, to have that confidence, walk with purpose. And I don't practice any of those skills sitting from home. And I didn't realize that if you don't use it, you lose. You have to practice it. So when I started coming into the office and those feelings of anxiety and speaking up started coming up again, it was very obvious of, wow, this is where I need to be in an uncomfortable place and challenge myself so that I can get better. That's in my takeaway.
Challenge yourself. Yeah.
I think I've just got one closing thought, and anyone who's worked with me the past few years will no doubt roll their eyes at having heard this a bunch of times. But I don't think I can ever really articulate for anyone what you're missing out on, what opportunities you're not getting, what unplanned exposures you're not going to have by avoiding opportunities in the office. But there's going to be something. Right? There's going to be something that's going to pass you by. There's going to be something that you'll look back on 6 months later and go, "Hey, I wish I could have been involved in that." And the only way to find out is to kind of jump in with 2 feet and see what happens. So I would always encourage it to the extent you can. And if you need to find a way, find a reason to make that trip, then look to the people that can help with that. Right? Look to managers, look to seniors, look to find an opportunity. But would always encourage it.
Yeah, take all the opportunities you can get, because you never know.
Yeah.
But, well, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Krishna. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Carolina. Thank you from GEP for joining our LinkedIn Live, and I hope to see you at our next one. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks.